We're going to be in an idea the entire time. And that idea is literally the question, does God exist? And what I want us to do this morning is I have put together your sheet in such a way, I wanted to simplify some of the arguments. This isn't an apologetics talk. I'm not trying to give you ammunition to make a point. What I do want us to be able to do, though, as believers, is be able to lovingly engage a culture that is turned their back on even the reasonable and rational concepts of God. And so that's what we're going to do this morning. So I hope you have a pen. This is something I want you to take with you, fold it up, stick it in your wallet, carry it with you because it'll give you some things to consider. And what I want us to do this morning is I want to be able to put something in your hands that you will easily be able to recall, that you'll easily be able to go to without feeling like you got to remember tons of texts and tons of arguments. But I'm going to make some cases this morning, and we're going to see what the Bible says. And we're going to see, can we know that God exists? Sir Isaac Newton, father of modern, really astronomy, and if I'm not mistaken, I'm not a huge scientific guy. Didn't he, discover gravity or something? Most of it, the myth or whatever goes to apple falling, Well, there is a story told about Sir Isaac Newton that, I don't know if you know this, but he was a theologian. He's known as an astronomer, but he was actually a theologian. And he had a friend, another scientific friend, who was an atheist. And he no matter what Sir Isaac did, he could not necessarily convince his friend that God existed. And as the story goes, again, you don't know if it's legend, myth, or what, but it's a good story, so let's not let truth mess it up. The story goes that Sir Isaac went to a craftsman in the town where he was at and had the craftsman create a model as accurately as he could to their specifications, what they had back then, a model of the solar system. And it was really amazingly done, evidently. This craftsman did a bang-up job of creating the solar system, and he put it together, and Sir Isaac picked it up, and he put it in his home where he was staying. And the story goes that the atheist came over and saw this on the centerpiece of a table and was just marveling at it, how amazing it was, and the detail and the craftsmanship. And then he goes to Isaac, he says, "So who crafted this?" And Sir Isaac said, "Nobody. Nobody crafted it." And the guy goes, "No, who did this? I must know. He's phenomenal. I must know who the artist was that built this." And he said, "No, nobody built it. It just happened. It appeared on the table." You get it, right? He was making the point that logic dictates at some level of rationality that all that exists because of an eternal being. Now here's the thing that we and everybody else gets caught up in. Are you ready? Definitions. What does it mean to prove something? Because everybody wants proof, right? Everybody needs to know, can you definitively, it's like the Jewish Sanhedrin. Do something for me now. Show up. Manifest yourself as deity before me, and I'll believe. Because that's the typical type of proof people are looking for, is this awesome display of God's divine power right here, right now. Do something for me. But to be honest, no one, you, me, scientists, no one using the word proof defines things that way. Proof is defined as evidence or argument establishing the truth of something, right? Evidence or argument. So we don't look at this and look for magic to happen. Yet when it comes to the existence of God, that's what everybody wants. Everybody, in order to believe, must have magic performed. But nowhere else in life do we do that. We don't perform magic anywhere else. We look for arguments. We look for truth. We look for evidence that makes things plausible, that makes things probable, and then we move. Now, as Christians, we all sit in this chair, right? And we believe this because of all that we've seen. Probably God working in your life, prayer, you've seen Him move in providential and even miraculous ways. We all have understood this. However, how do you explain providence and miracle to a person who doesn't believe it and who's never experienced it? That's what we're going to do. So the first thing I want us to ask, the question is, what does the Bible say about the existence of God? We've all read them. I'm going to read them anyway. I'm not going to just blitz through these, but I want you to see them because you have Christians that are without excuse. Believers should never waver in your faith that God exists. One other little thing I want us to do here is, I'm literally just focusing on God, the person, the eternal being of God. I'm not necessarily defining Him based on any set of characteristics this morning. We will talk about Jesus, but we're going to get to all that next time. There's so much built into this, and I wanted us to focus on, can you say God exists or doesn't exist? And are these rational and reasonable arguments? So, what does the Bible say? First of all, we've all read Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, right? It's the very first verse of the Bible, and believe it or not, this is the most scientific verse in the Bible. In order for God to exist, He has to be outside. He has to be separated from time, space, and matter. We recognize this. If God is connected or not transcendent somehow of time, space, and matter, He can't be God. And we're going to look at some of that here in a second. So in the beginning, time, God created the heavens, space, the earth, matter. All right? So we see that. Another verse that I love to read, it's one of my favorites, is John 1:1-3. And John, he takes us back to Genesis 1:1, but he expounds on it. He says, in the beginning was the Word. Now it's interesting that he's qualifying who was in the beginning, and he's talking about Christ. In this whole section of text, he brings up the person of Jesus. This is who John is describing. The Word. The Word was with God. The Word was God. He was in the beginning. All things were created. All things came into being by Him. And apart from Him, nothing came into being that has come into being. He's the Creator. All things that have come into being by God. Nihil fit ex nihilo. It's Latin. Kind of like e pluribus unum, right? But it's not. It means nothing comes from nothing. We get this. All things have come from something. Here's another verse. This is found in Romans, and this is a little more bent towards how do we get to a place where people will deny the existence of God, even in a reasonable, logical situation. How do we get there? I'm going to read two verses. First one is verse 21 of Romans 1. It says, for even though they knew God, they did not honor Him as God or give thanks, but they became futile in their speculations. Their foolish hearts were darkened. So there's something happening. They're creating and inventing things in their mind. There's a speculation. Even when we look at things around us, we turn towards speculation. There's a darkening rather than a lightening. See, light exposes truth. Dark hides it. Look at verse 25. It says, for they exchanged the truth of God for a lie. And they begin to worship and serve creatures rather than the Creator who is blessed forever. Amen. Okay, so the idea of God existence is obviously, you can't turn a page. You can't go anywhere without the name, the words of God in the Bible. So, the Bible very clearly defends, and we're going to show you, we're going to look at some other things, but these are texts that you can go to easily and say, look, this is what He's done, this is who He is. So the next question is it reasonable to say there is no God? Is it rational? Can a person exist and with all their faculties, okay, all of our brain, all of the stuff that we've been given, can we exist on this earth and say that God does not? I'm going to make the argument that that's irrational. And of course, I'm the pastor. I have to say that, right? I'm up here doing it. I'm going to make the argument that no, you can't say that God exists without without ignoring flat out ignoring or changing. Again, speculation, darkening, hiding, without ignoring things. And so let me propose this. We're going to look at two questions under this question. To determine whether someone can say there is no God, the first thing we have to say is, well, do we have collective information? All there is to know in the universe. Right? Do we possess all knowledge in the world? So I ask you that. How much knowledge do you know? Okay, so now you see where this is going. This is really simple, right? So let's pretend like this video screen up here. This video screen represents all knowledge that could ever be known about anything ever. How many words, if we were to fill this up with words, would represent the amount of knowledge that you have? All right? And you're brilliant. I mean, look at you. You're at benchmark this morning. You must be, right? How much knowledge do you have? Well, some would say, well, I could fill maybe 25% of this up. Dang. Some, I'm a letter, maybe. I'm a punctuation mark, right? Well, there in turn, and no one would say they could fill this up. If you say, well, I know everything, we would all deem you as unfit to take care of yourself. And we would hire somebody to come in and guide you and lead you. Or we would say that your ego, you're so arrogant, you think so highly of yourself that you're delusional. No one would fit in here and say that everything that they know everything that could fit in the screen. So it begs the question, is it reasonable to say that God does not exist when we know so little about what's left in the empty spaces of this screen? Of course not. It's not reasonable, nor is it rational. So for someone to stand on the premise that God does not exist, and I will die believing that, it begs us to say, are you okay? Did you get hurt? And I'll be honest with you, a lot of times it's not a physical pain or physical growth, it's emotional or something spiritual. They got hurt all right. A lot of times, can I just tell you this? A lot of times they got hurt by us. They're there saying God does not exist because of what the church did. Okay, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on that, but I want us to know that. Don't ever look at somebody who says God does not exist and I know it. Don't look at them and go, oh yeah? Let's go, dude, because I'm a Christian, baby. That's going to become another gift. Bear's going to record that, and it's going to be on the screen somewhere. Bear recorded something I said, boom, Jesus, baby, or something, and it's circulating. Anyway, I got to be careful. We shouldn't go like this. We should go, oh, you don't? Well, can I ask you a question? What happened? Did somebody say something? Somebody do something? Because it's not reasonable. That's not rational. Now, here's the second question. All knowledge. And then the other thing that we really have to look at is, okay, if God doesn't exist, what implications does that mean for the universe? And it means basically three concepts. And the first one is that there's a lack of meaning. In other words, without God, nothing has meaning. Nothing has meaning. Niagara Falls. You ever been there? You ever show up to it? It'll take your breath away. I stood there, went down to the bottom of it, let the mist fall on you. I mean, and you're listening, you're yelling. Me and Jolene were yelling at each other because the noise was so deafening of the water hitting the rocks. And millions upon millions upon millions of gallons are flowing over the side of this thing, and it never stops. Every second, every minute. And it's just been going like that. Without God, that means nothing. It's meaningless. It just is there. How about this? Purpose. Without God, nothing has purpose. The questions of why are you here cannot be answered. You can create these answers for yourself, but apart from you, they mean nothing. Because the final authority would be yourself. And the values. Values mean nothing. Why is slavery wrong? You know, slavery is wrong, and slavery got outlawed across the globe because of Christ. Did you know that? Because of Christians. Slavery is wrong because there is a moral being who created all things and which we are an image bearer of. Therefore, not just because of cultural standards. Okay, you see my point? So without God meaning, we have to really ask certain questions about the implications. Do you want a world without God? See my point? Okay, so I love to do this too. I love to say this analogy. The concept of us knowing everything, the concept of implication of that is like this. I love jelly beans. If I were to make the statement, there are no rainbow-colored jelly beans in the world. They don't exist. And the problem with this is that I've seen jelly beans, and they're all different colors, right? So I know that the colors exist, but one that has every color of the rainbow lined up, I've actually never seen. I haven't. So I don't believe that they exist. The problem is I have not seen all the jelly beans that exist, right? And I've seen the implications of all of the colors that are out there. So I know that the possibility of all of these colors exist together. It could happen. But for me to rationally and reasonably say there are no rainbow-colored jelly beans, it doesn't make any sense. You see my point? Okay, so let's look at another question. Okay? Let me read a verse for you before we get into the other question. The Bible says in Proverbs 14:1, it says this: the fool says in his heart, there is no God. Now the reason I started it this way is because we're going to look at some concepts of this, but I want you to see the Bible teaches this. But for somebody to ignore this, they have to know what's right and choose to do different. That's foolishness. It's not just not knowing. It's knowing right and choosing to do something else. Romans chapter 1 says this is what's called the suppression of truth. Okay? Let's look at this. They are corrupt. They have committed abominable deeds. I tried to highlight these words: fool, no God, corrupt. Think of corruption not like a politician would be corrupt. Think of corruption like a computer. You ever get a computer that all of a sudden something happens to it and it shuts down and it starts spitting out wrong information, and you say, oh, the hard drive must be corrupted. That's the type of corruption we're talking about. Something has happened, and now error is coming out. They're corrupt. Their deeds are abominable. This type of corruption leads to turning their back on God, denying God. Therefore, their deeds become based in sin and self. And there's no one who does good. Now, this is our starting point. This is where we start from. The next question is, if God exists, what are our options? What are our options for God? Okay? So I'm going to give you three things. There's probably a lot more options for what God could, what could have explained all that is and how the universe came into being. But the first, I'm going to give you three because they're the most prominent. The first one is that the universe is an illusion. The universe is an illusion. Do you remember the movie The Matrix? It was, first of all, it started out as a comic book series. I don't know if you know this. It turned into a cartoon that turned into a movie. And the whole concept is that we live, and all the reality we know is just a computer program. And you are in this little cocoon-like thing plugged into a massive machine that is feeding into your brain all that you see, but your reality is that you're just this little emaciated little human in a cocoon, and the machines are using you to heat the world. I know. You saw the movie and didn't even know that, right? Okay? And the idea is that all that you know is an illusion. And this is what that concept comes from, is that everything must... How do we know that anything is real? The problem with this is that to believe this means that you have to ignore all 5 of your senses. And I think that's why God gave you senses. So that you could touch, touch, taste, hear, feel, smell. How many was that? How many? See, thank you, Dad. All that is around you and understand it. It lacks logical consistency. And no one on a daily basis lives believing that everything that is just an illusion, because you can't. There's too much information coming in that proves to you otherwise. So the Eastern religions that fall to this can't logically hold to it. They can say it, but they can't logically hold to it. So we pitch this one out because it won't hold up and make sense. The next one is that the universe was eternal. Do you guys remember the steady state theory? Scientific steady state theory, Sir Fred Hoyle, he came up with this idea. Matter of fact, he's the guy who coined the term the Big Bang on a BBC radio station because he was making fun of all the people that ever believed that this Big Bang could have created the world. And because he thought only something eternal could have created all we see, and he believed that the universe has just always existed. Now the problem with this is that the universe can't be eternal. If it was, then we'd have to redefine all of the laws of thermodynamics. I mean, scientists easily debunked the steady state theory. Because once you begin to recognize that the first and second law of thermodynamics, the second one being that energy is always the law of entropy, that things are going from order to disorder, that the universe is slowing down. That's the big rage, that things are slowing down, that things are moving from order to chaos. No, it can't be eternal. And not only that, there's logical implications of if the universe is eternal, then there's implications on time. How do you get to a present if there's never been a past and there's never going to be a future? You know what I'm saying? I don't know if you know that, but time has to have a beginning. It's like, think of books on a bookshelf, okay? Just not to get off on this, but think of books on a bookshelf. You want to go grab a single book on a bookshelf. But you have to have a logical reference point of where to start, because they go infinitively that way on the shelf and they go infinitively this way on the shelf. So there is no reference point to find the book. In other words, time, you would never have a present if it's always just been going. I just blew everybody's head off, didn't I? Okay? So there's things like that. We recognize easily that the universe cannot be eternal because, once again, how did it become eternal? And does it even have the properties of an eternal being? It does not. It has the properties of a finite being or creation or whatever. See my point? Then the third one is this. The idea that the universe just emerged from nothing. This is the most prominent today in scholasticism. That the universe had no specific components, but that it just emerged. And I go back to the old rational concepts of nihil fit ex nihilo. Nothing comes from nothing. No scientist in rational concept is going to look at this and go, well, it just came to be. You know the old cartoon, or the old, story, scientists are going to prove that they can create everything that God created. They're going to go all the way back to the beginning. They're going to show how this could have happened. And so the scientists, they get together and they go, okay, what's the first thing we need? How can we show that we can create life? And they say, okay, let's get some dirt. And God says, no, get your own dirt. That's the idea. You can't start from gas. Get your own gases. You can't start from pressure. Get your own pressure. Those are laws of that I created. You can't start from all this. You have to start from nothing. Now go. The idea that where we are in this world where God doesn't exist is spun because of our drive and need to explain not just the processes that have happened since the beginning. See, that's what science does. Science can start at the beginning, or just moments past the beginning. We can see all that. We can look at that and explain so much about that. But that beginning and pre that, there's nothing to explore. There's nothing to explain. So it leaves us with the idea that if the world came into being, something had to have caused it. And that something had to be an eternal being. Now again, what is that? Is it Allah? Is it the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob? Is it Jesus? Those are your three main monotheistic creation believing religions: Judaism, Islam, and Christianity. What is it? We're not going to get into that just yet. What I want to do is I want to show you what some scientists have said. These are all atheists. These are all agnostics. Robert Jastrow said this: "For the scientist who has lived by his faith in the power of reason, the story ends like a bad dream. He has scaled the mountain of ignorance. He is about to conquer the highest peak. And as he pulls himself over the final rock, he is greeted by a band of theologians who have been sitting there for centuries." He's an agnostic scientist. Fred Hoyle, Sir Fred Hoyle, coined the term Big Bang. He's created the steady state theory. He said this: "A common sense interpretation of the facts suggests that a super intellect has monkeyed with physics, as well as chemistry and biology, and that there are no blind forces worth speaking about in nature." Nobel Prize winner, and I can't say this guy's name, Arno Penzias, is that right? He's a Nobel Prize winner. It's got to be brilliant, right? What does he say about it? "The best data we have is exactly what I would have predicted had I nothing to go on but the first 5 books of Moses, the Psalms, and the Bible as a whole." So, how do we know that God exists? Let me give you 2 things. Okay? I just want to give you 2 things. If you're ever going to explain how do you know God exists, the first argument that you should always start with is it's not an argument as much as it's a law. It's a law of physics. It's called the law of cause and effect. It's simple. It's very simple. Everything that has an effect has a cause to explain it. And you can then at this point challenge anybody. Find me something without a cause. Everything's an effect. You're an effect, I'm an effect. What we do typically is we go back and we talk about something that is an effect, saying it's a cause, and then we just kick the can down the road. So one would be like the concept of panspermia. You know what this is? It's the idea that aliens seeded the planet Earth, and that's how we got life on Earth. Well, once again, that may be a great explanation for how we existed, but who then created them? They were an effect of something. And so we keep kicking the can down the road until your brain explodes and you get to the place where you go, there must be some form of eternal causer. The Bible says in Psalm 19, 1 and 2, you have read this 1,000 times. The heavens tell of the glory of God. Why do you look in the sky and we're enamored? When you see this mountainscape and the stars behind it, you're enamored because you go, those things are so huge. And they're so far away. And this is so big. And they're so bright. And so much is happening in mathematical precision. And you look at it all and you go, all of these things are effects. They're effects of something. The causer must be mind-blowing. Islamic scholasticism. It developed in the 16th century, around there. Has what they call the Kalam argument. And it's been adopted by Christians because it's the cause and effect argument. It says this: everything which begins to exist has a cause apart from itself. I began to exist. My parents are sitting here. Each one of them began to exist. They have parents, so on and so on and so on. Look at the trees outside, look at the lamp, look at the guitar. Everything, something created, something had a cause, something put it together. This is part of the argument. The universe began to exist is the second part of the argument. No one denies that. There's not a scientist on the planet that's not in a mental institution will deny this, right? Therefore, the universe has a cause apart from itself. So the question is, if everything around us is the effect of something, what could have caused it? So that's the first rational concept, that something, whether you call it God or whatever, has to exist apart from us, apart from space, apart from time. So sock that away. Sock that concept away of cause and effect. And then I want the second thing that I want us to see here. It's a little more controversial. And it's the idea that design demands a designer, right? Again, this is built within the laws of logic. Okay, when I'm using words like laws, because when something becomes a law, what do we do with it? It's provable. It's falsified. You can reproduce it through experiment to make it into a law. So this is built within the laws of logic and within the laws of what we call probability, mathematical laws. Okay, and it says this, that the order and design in this world demands that there be an intelligent and purposeful designer. The Bible says in Romans 1:18 through 20 about this concept. The wrath of God is being revealed from heaven against all ungodliness and unrighteousness of men who suppress the truth in unrighteousness. So this concept of God becoming suppressed because that which is known about God is evident within them, even in us. Us who are, I can tell you this, before I came to know Jesus, before you probably came to know Christ, there was a moment in your life when you wanted to deny your culpability, your responsibility to Him, right? And you didn't want Him to be true because at some point, you're going to be responsible for all that you've done. And so there's this holding the ball underwater, so to speak. If I can just get it below the surface and keep it down, that's what we mean by suppressing the truth. Keep reading. Because that which is known about God is evident within them, for God made it evident to them. It's all around us. Look what he says, verse 20. For since the creation of the world, His invisible attributes, His eternal power, His divine nature, have been clearly seen, being understood through what has been made, so that you and I, everybody else, can't have an excuse to say there is no God. We don't have an excuse for this. We have now a responsibility to find out who this guy is. That is a good question. Who is He? But we don't have the right rationality or reasonable conclusion to say that He does not exist. Let me walk you through some things. So the concept of design is really based within three ideas. This is what we're going to finish up today. And these ideas get pretty heady, but I want you to stay with me. I hope I can explain them well enough that they make sense. The first idea is what we call irreducible complexity. All right? The idea of something being irreducible means that you can't take it apart without it completely losing its function. The great illustration of this is what they call the mousetrap, right? Can you design a better mousetrap? Maybe you can. The old snappy thing that catches everybody's fingers when you're trying to put it together. I wish Spunky were here. He's probably got scars from them, right? If you take off any piece of... Oh, Henry's here again. Sorry. You remove any piece of it, it loses its functionality. It's called irreducible complexity. And guess what? The universe is full of it. It's full of these places that the human cell is one of them. The human cell that if you remove any aspect or piece of it, it ceases to be able to do its job and dies. It's amazing. This is a concept called irreducible complexity. Another concept is what we call specified complexity. That things become so complicated, specific, and reproduced in patterns that they can't be random. Okay, so give you an idea of what this means. I have a couple of graphics I want you to see on the screen. Okay, this, believe it or not, is alphabet cereal. Let's pretend that this is your breakfast, and you show up every morning to this bowl. Now, let's pretend like, oh, sorry, my thing's going off here. Let's pretend like all of a sudden you show up one morning and this is what it looks like. You can't read it. I'll read it to you. It's amazing what you can find on the internet. Quit your job, do more drugs. Now, that's going to surprise you. It's going to surprise you because it's so specifically complex. It tells you information that's readable, that's understandable. You're not going to think that your wife or somebody just poured that bowl for you and that just happened. It's too specific. You're going to go, who did this? Who put this in my bowl? If you've got kids, you're going to go, those darn kids. You're going to blame it on a designer, right? My watch. This was my graduation from seminary present to myself. Now my wife got it for me. All right. If you saw this in the woods, you're not going to think that it was randomly produced by nature. Why? Because it's too specifically complex. Natural laws do not produce this. Right? Let me read you something. We have time? We got it. Let me read you something. I'm going to read you about the brain. You ready for this? Get ready to have your brain blown. The brain is composed of over 10 trillion different cells. And there's about 100 plus of us in here that have one of these. Right? You got 10 trillion different cells. These cells work together to send electrical impulses at a rate of 273 miles per hour or 393 feet per second. Woo! That's fast. The nerve cells in your body send 2,000 impulses to your brain every second. I mean, that's fast. These impulses come from 130,000 light receptors in your eyes, 100,000 hearing receptors in your ears, 3,000 taste buds in your mouth, and over 500,000 touch spots on your body. And guess what? That didn't just randomly happen to me. There's about 100 of us that it randomly happened to. Sitting in a room. Check this out. And as this happens, the brain does not move. It's not like it's up there going, drinking coffee. Oh, I can't keep up. I can't keep up. It just sits there. Keep going. It just sits there, yet it consumes over 25% of the body's oxygen and receives 20% of all the blood that is pumped from your heart. And it's consisting that the brain makes up only 2% of the weight of the average human. Consider that the brain serves as a doctor for the rest of the entire body, producing more than 50 different drugs. From painkillers like endorphins to antidepressants like serotonin. Your brain produces drugs. In addition, your brain allows you to remember words, remember smells, remember pictures, remember colors. The brain is so good it allows a person to remember information and to process it. And it's been estimated that it would require 500 sets of encyclopedias to hold the information found in your brain. God is amazing. Let me give you one last thing. One last little piece here. It's the idea of, you got irreducible complexity, you've got specified complexity, you've got what they call anthropic principles. You ever thought about if we took the Earth, or why does the Earth spin the way it does? Why is it located from the sun the way it is? Why does it have to sit at 23 point whatever degrees tilt? Why? Why is the moon right where it's at? How come oxygen, anybody tell me this? How come oxygen makes up about 20, is it almost 20, it's like 20.8% of the air, and about 70, almost 80% of it's made up of nitrogen. Why? Why not just give us a lot more oxygen? I mean, that's what we need to live. You ever thought about you ever thought about this? There's about seven different colors of stars. Blue stars, light blue stars, red stars, light red stars, orange stars, white stars. There's another one I can't remember, and there's a yellow star. How come ours is yellow? You ever thought about that? Why didn't we get the red star? I bet a blue star would be really pretty at night, or the day in the sky. No, we got a yellow one. You know why? These are called anthropic principles, because guess what? If any of these things that I said to you were changed in any way, life could not exist on the earth. If our distance to the sun was any different, life could, the way it is today, would look differently. If there was more oxygen in the air, you couldn't put out a fire. Did you know that? You'd have spontaneous, you think California's burning up. The rest of the world would be gone. The sun's color is yellow because photosynthesis requires it to be yellow. Did you know that? Photosynthesis can't happen with any other color star. Well, how do we know that? Because God designed it so perfectly that it randomly could not have happened. That's called an anthropic principle. So let me share with you this idea that chance produces things. It again goes back to reasonability and irrationality. It just cannot be. We have to think. We have to open our mind. I think it's so funny how the world believes that Christians in the church are so closed-minded. It's not that we're closed-minded. It's that we've opened our mind to the possibility, the plausibility, the rationality that you and I are not random actions of nature, but we're designed beings by an eternal creator. So it begs the question, who is this guy? Who is he and what must he be like? That's next week. Well, that's not next week, that's the week after next. But let me finish with this. I want you to see something. Now that we've really got this God guy, he must be there. I want to show you something that should blow your mind away. Listen to this verse, okay? But God, being rich in mercy. Okay, stop right there. This is not just a scientific God. He's not just the God who created fractal geometry, calculus. He's not just the God who created microbiology. He's deeper. But God, being rich in mercy, because of His great love for us, the love with which He loved us, even when you and I were dead in our transgressions. You want to know what that translates to? Even when you and I were enemies of His. When we were His enemies. This God, look at what He did. He made us alive together with Christ. See, that's why when you sing, "It is well with my soul," and you get to that verse, "My sin, oh the bliss of this glorious thought, not my sin in part, but the whole of my sin was nailed to the cross, and I bear it no more." when you get to that point, you go, and you start to squeak a little. Because this God, who's so intrinsically and easily, the Bible says easily, with the mouths of His Word, put all this together, thought of you. Thought of you. Thought of me. That He would bear our transgression and make us alive. Hallelujah.